commerce and industry, and want to thank each and every one of you for joining us, taking time out of your busy day to join us for our first virtual fly-in. I know this is an annual event that Tennessee Chamber typically holds where we actually go into Washington, D.C. And get perspective from our federal lawmakers and also our trade association partners, include the U.S. Chamber, the National Association of Manufacturers, and the American Chemistry Council. So again, thank you for joining us today. We hope everyone is certainly staying well. We've got a great program today, a number of significant information that you'll receive today. I would say that if you do have questions, due to the number of participants that we have, likely it's going to be best to ask those questions through the chat at the bottom of the page. I do want to thank the chamber staff for putting a lot of work into the program of this and coordinating it all. Please be patient with us. You all know sometimes these meetings, we have sometimes timing is off and everything, so we appreciate everyone's patience. I do want to remind everyone that we are recording this meeting so that we can share it later to participants who can't join us right now. All attendees are only in the view mode, and again, you can be recognized by typing your questions down in the chat window. We greatly appreciate our friends in the media. However, this meeting is closed to the press. If you have any questions regarding the content of this or any chamber positions, please feel free to contact us directly here at the Tennessee Chamber. For the first part of our program, we will be discussing results of the August congressional primaries in Outlook in November. So I will turn over to Ryan King, but before I do that, I do want to recognize Vanderbilt University, who's a great member of the Tennessee Chamber and has generously sponsored this. And we'd like at this time to hear an update from Nathan Green. I know he's a member of the Tennessee Chamber Board of Directors, but a little insight into some great things that's going on at Vanderbilt University. Nathan, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Bradley. I think Nathan's going to be back for some sponsor comments later, and thanks to Nathan and Vanderbilt University and their great team over there for helping make this possible today. I think we've got a really strong program, and it's because of their generosity that we were able to do this. Really, for the first part of the program, we've got some interesting races. Really, one in particular for an open seat up in East Tennessee. We kind of want to enlighten you guys on just a little bit while we're here today, and then we're going to turn it over to Senator Marsha Blackburn for the next part of our program. But we do have a few minutes here that we want to kind of go through some elections briefly. I don't know that we're going to be able to give you much insight that you don't already have. With the way our news moves today and our social media outlets move today, but we'll go over some high points and really dive into that House District 1 congressional race in Upper East Tennessee. And we got a friend on the line here who will help us break that down. First of all, we'll start with the Senate. I don't think it's any surprise that Ambassador Bill Hagerty is the heavy favorite for that. He defeated Manny Sethi in the primary back in August. I think many expected that would be a much closer race than it actually was, but really Ambassador Hagerty ran away with that one, and his campaign really did a tremendous job there. After some independent dollars, personal dollars were lent to his campaign on his behalf. Of course, he's a former ambassador to Japan under President Trump. Used President Trump heavily through the campaign process, had endorsed by Trump on lots of his signage, and is still using that campaign slogan in lots of ways, and is obviously heavy endorsed by the administration and the family. He was Commissioner of Economic and Community Development here in Tennessee, and he still touts that very proudly. He did so when we had our Senate forums back a couple of months ago, and by all accounts will continue to do that. Now, the big surprise in the primaries is when Marquita Bradshaw actually upset James Mackler, who had really a war chest, relatively speaking, of $2.1 million. Miss Bradshaw raised $8,400. So a huge discrepancy there in the amounts that they raised. She's looking to make history. She's already making history as the first major minority female candidate on a major party platform in Tennessee. So that comes just 2 years after Senator Blackburn got elected as our first female senator from the state of Tennessee. So really making some history there. A few side notes: Tennessee has not elected a Democrat in Tennessee since 1990. Hard to believe that's been 30 years since we elected a Democrat to the U.S. Senate in Tennessee. And a side note, that was then Senator Al Gore Jr., later Vice President, and Tennessee has not, a Democrat in Tennessee has not held a U.S. Senate seat since 1994, so 26 years, and that's kind of unbelievable that it's been that long. Really, the closest since then has been 2006, and I think most of us remember Senator Corker actually defeated then House Congressman Harold Ford Jr. By about 50,000 votes. So a really close race, and that's really been the closest general election race that we've had in Tennessee since 1990. Laura Barnett, we'll have a conversation about your Congressional District 1. Really, we've got, of our 9 seats in Tennessee, it's believed that 8 of those seats are going to continue to be held by the incumbent. Here at the chamber, we don't expect anything otherwise, although all of those are contested. We do expect all the incumbents in the 8 other seats, those are our districts 2 through 9, to get reelected. But tell us about, Laura, Congressional District 1, formerly held by Congressman Phil Rowe, who is stepping down. It was a crowded field in the primary, wasn't it?
It was a very crowded field. Just on the Republican side alone, we had 15 candidates. So as you can imagine, it was a very tight field going into this, but it did come down to the Republican candidate who is now the Republican nominee is Diana Harshbarger. We also have the Democratic candidate who is Blair Walsingham, and I'll kind of tell you a little bit about both of them now that we've narrowed down the field. So Diana, she was born and raised in Kingsport. After becoming the first person or family to graduate high school, she went on to ETSU and eventually got her Doctor of Pharmacy degree at Mercer University. She has since returned, and since she has returned to Kingsport, she's served in her community in many ways. She's been a licensed pharmacist for 33 years and a small business owner for 28. She's taught Sunday school, helped with church missions, a lot of local nonprofits. She's a leader in her field, in her business, and a member of the Kingsport Chamber and a former board member of the International Academy of Compounding Pharmacists. She's overcome many challenges, which includes beating out those other candidates in the GOP primary that includes several state representatives, a state senator, and 2 former mayors to become the Republican nominee. Blair Walsingham is the Democratic candidate. She's an Air Force veteran, a mother of 4 children, small business owner as well. She's running on the platform of health, freedom, and financial security. She is laser focused on pursuing policies that reduce bureaucracy and ensure greater access to opportunity for all Americans. I will say the importance of this race is that for the first time in history, we have 2 female candidates, 1 Republican and 1 Democrat. In the history of the first congressional district, we have never had a woman elected for this seat. So we are making history in this election as well. So we're looking forward to a good race. And we know that no matter what the outcome is, that we will have a female congresswoman representing the first district.
Lauren, before we get too much further, tell us, we didn't introduce you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Laura Barnett. I'm with the Kingsport Chamber. I am the Executive Director of Government Relations and Workforce Development. Thanks for having me today.
For my next question, really, since Reconstruction, District 1 has been really a Republican stronghold here in Tennessee. If Ms. Harshbarger is the nominee and she prevails in the general, how do you envision her relationship with the Northeast Tennessee business community being?
I think it is going to be a very positive relationship. She is a local small business owner, as said previously. She's very supportive of the business community. She's very supportive of the chambers as well. She's already had many, many meetings already with everyone from business owners to the chambers and local leaders in every one of the counties that's in her district. So she is getting out there. She's meeting with people. She's letting them know her platforms. We met with her a couple of weeks ago. I think she's going to be very positive for the values that we stand for in supporting the business community with the chamber.
Thanks, Laura. And one last question. What types of issues do you think she, if elected, is going to come armed to Washington to try to tackle? Has she indicated the types of things she's going to be interested in? She
is wanting to get assigned to the things that will be most beneficial for East Tennessee. She wants to just get in and work right away on legislation that is going to incentivize companies to bring manufacturing production back to the United States. So that is one of her top priorities.
Well, thanks. And Laura, anything you'd like to add before we move on to our next guest?
No, thank you so much for having us today. This is going to be one of the races to watch, so we're looking forward to it.
Thank you, Laura, and thanks for joining us. Certainly, all eyes, I think, in Tennessee will be on that one and our U.S. Senate race. We are very lucky to have our next guest join us, I think from D.C. Today, as they're trying to get some work done and I think a budget proposal done. U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn was sworn into the Senate, as we mentioned earlier, in January 2019. Senator Blackburn was elected to the Senate in 2018 and is currently serving in her first term representing Tennessee. Before her election to the Senate, she represented Tennessee's 7th Congressional District, which is in Middle Tennessee. Her public service is dedicated to promoting opportunities for women and making America a more prosperous place to live. Senator Blackburn's leadership philosophy is based on her experience in the private sector as a small businesswoman and an author, as well as being a mother and grandmother. She went to college on a 4-H scholarship and worked her way through school selling books for the Southwestern Company as one of their first female sales associates and later as one of their first female sales managers. Senator Blackburn is a member of numerous charitable organizations and is an active member of her church, Christ Presbyterian. Marsha and her husband Chuck live in Williamson County, Tennessee, where they have 2 children, Mary Morgan, Ketchel and Chad Blackburn, and 2 grandsons. Originally from Laurel, Mississippi, she is a graduate of Mississippi State University. And it is my honor to introduce Senator Marsha Blackburn. Senator, thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm delighted to be with you, and thank you. We are indeed working away here in DC and trying to come to a resolution on a Phase 4 bill. As you all know, last week we put a bill on the floor which would have repurposed and repositioned about $350 billion of the CARES Act, which was still in the pipeline. All total, there's about $1 trillion of the CARES Act that is still in the pipeline. And what we wanted to do was get a second round of PPP, beef up the unemployment insurance. As you know, the president signed an executive order on August 8th for the unemployment insurance plus up, and we wanted to put that into statute. We also had, liability protections in that bill, money for schools, money for testing, money for vaccines. Again, repurposed and repositioned dollars. And we were very disappointed that our colleagues across the aisle, every one of them voted no. We even put money for the post office, even though the post office has a surplus, and I said they really couldn't spend it all if we did send it to them. So we're going to continue working on that. We have asked, and I know now some of the Democrats in the House have, there's about 100 of them that are trying to get Speaker Pelosi and the Democratic leadership to work with us for a bill. There is a group, the Problem Solvers, about 50 of the House Democrats who have worked with some of the senators, and they came forward with a bill that was about a $1.5 trillion bill, and Pelosi said no, she would not take that up. So we're hopeful that we're going to see a little bit of progress from them as we go. There's been a lot of money put into the economy with COVID. The phase 1 bill, the first one that was done back in March 6th, was $8.3 billion, and it was primarily money for the CDC, the NIH, the FDA, and focusing on figuring out kind of what we could know. We had a lot of unknowns, and we knew we were going to need some testing and diagnostics, and so that money went out. Then there was the phase 2 bill that really didn't have dollars in it, but required insurance companies to cover the COVID testing and Medicare, Medicaid to cover COVID testing, and then 2 weeks of paid sick leave for anybody that had to be quarantined. That had some complications in it for small businesses, and the unfunded mandates were very difficult for small businesses. Then the CARES Act, which was $2.3 trillion, and then we had the bill that came in behind that, the phase 3.5 bill, which was another $321 billion for PPP. And Tennessee has done a phenomenal job with the PPP loans. The state has upwards of $8 billion in PPP loans that are now out there. We are working on simplification for that loan forgiveness application. What we are seeking to do is get that down to one page for loans that are $150,000 or less. And basically it is, I got X amount of money. I spent my 60% X on payroll. I spent X for rent, X for overhead, X for payments, just something that simple. And we think it is for those loans in that category of that size. We think that's the right way to move forward. We are continuing to focus on some of our businesses that desperately need that second round of PPP, and also our entertainment businesses and those venues that are up in the Upper Cumberland, over in East Tennessee, Sevier County, around Nashville, some down in Shelby County and Memphis. And we know that they need the Restart Act, the Save Our Stages program, things that will help them to stabilize. So indeed, we continue to work with our colleagues to try to get that across the finish line. Other things that we are working on as we move toward recovery is returning pharmaceutical manufacturing to the U.S. And interestingly enough, my SAMC legislation, which Senator Menendez and I filed back in February, before COVID was an issue, this would return pharmaceutical manufacturing, active pharmaceutical ingredients, and put the emphasis on advanced manufacturing concepts for universities to partner up with pharmaceutical companies, and a $100 million grant program for training in advanced manufacturing and also for R&D. So we had some of those components in the Phase 4 bill that we had on the floor last week. And we were really very sorry that that did not move forward. We had hoped that would help us with getting bipartisan support. A couple of other things. We probably, what you're going to see is a continuing resolution, a clean CR. You'll probably see that come to the floor next week in the Senate. We are encouraging that. As I said, we do not know if we're going to get a Phase 4 bill. We have tried several things the White House has tried, and we have not been able to reach a negotiation with our friends across the aisle. So you to stay in touch with us. Our website, blackburn.senate.gov. We have a newsletter that we do every Friday. If you're not on that newsletter list, I would encourage you to sign up for it. We put a lot of good information there that's important to the state. Also, you'll find us on social media at Marsha Blackburn. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we do our best to get information out to the state. I will tell you this, I've been doing my 95 county tour virtually, and we're not able to get into the counties for meetings right now with the mayors. And as we talked with them, they said it'd be better to do it virtually. Of course, many of our counties have small courthouses. They're trying to get people in to do business. The courtrooms are small. They didn't feel they could socially distance. So we've been working with our county mayors and doing these meetings. Spirits are good all across the state. Counties, their revenues are good. They're holding up. We have some counties that have their sales tax revenues, their general fund revenues are up as much as 20-25%. So, and they have help wanted signs that are out. We have, one county had about 160 jobs that they were trying to get filled. A plant had had an expansion during all of this COVID. We have another county that has issued 200 building permits. People are leaving major metropolitan areas in the north. They're moving to Tennessee. There are retirees that are leaving these areas and are coming to Tennessee. We're seeing a good bit of that. So our state has really weathered this, I think, much better than many other states, but we are incredibly hopeful for a rebound that is going to come a bit more quickly than I think some other areas will come. I will say the Census Bureau released their economic data this week, and we were very pleased to see that for 2019, the average household income saw a $4,400 increase. We thought that was very promising. And it shows some resiliency that indeed you're seeing in the economy and why you're seeing that resiliency as unemployment numbers come down. We also thought it was significant that the poverty rate was the lowest that it had been. The historical average, it was lower, it was at 10.8%. And African-American poverty, child poverty, all of those numbers were the best that they had ever been, or I think the female poverty rate was the best that it had been in 50 years. We see those as promising indicators, and we know that's the kind of normalcy that people would like to be able to return to. So we're doing our best to help Tennesseans get that return to normalcy. We just are really appreciative of you all and the good work that you do and the way you have worked to handle the adverse conditions that have been thrown at you during COVID. So please do be in touch with us, and when we can be helpful to you, let us know. Thanks so much, and I'll send it back to you, Ryan.
Well, thank you, Senator Blackburn. This is Bradley with the Tennessee Chamber. And while we've got you on, we wanted to, we have the U.S. Chamber on with us here today, Moore Hallmark, to present you with a very special award. And before I turn over to Moore, who's Vice President of Regional Affairs and Congressional and Public Affairs for the U.S. Chamber. On behalf of the State Chamber, we greatly appreciate our working relationship over the years. I know going back to the late 1990s, we worked with you on a number of issues when you were here in the State Senate. So with that said, more Hallmark, I'll turn over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. Senator, it's great to see you today. I'm sorry we can't be together in person, but Bradley, thank you as well for the opportunity to join you today to recognize Senator Blackburn as a true friend of business for all of us. As many of you may or may not know, last year at the beginning of the 116th Congress, our CEO, Tom Donahue, announced the biggest update in 40 years to how the U.S. Chamber would rate lawmakers on our annual How They Voted scorecard. While continuing to rate members of Congress largely based upon their voting records, the new scorecard also emphasizes the need for more bipartisanship and leadership, and then recognizing members of Congress for their willingness to work across the aisle and show leadership on issues that are important to the business community. For those members of Congress whose collective voting record, including leadership and bipartisanship, scores above 70% or more, in that year of Congress receives the Chamber's coveted Spirit of Enterprise Award. Last year, for the first session of the 116th Congress, the Chamber designated just 16 votes out of the dozens taken on the Senate floor as among the most important. Some of those votes and issues included free trade and the passage of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. A number of confirmation hearings, including Paul Ray as the administrator for the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, and Kimberly Reed as president of the Export-Import Bank. And then also the 2020 appropriations bill, which included a number of the U.S. Chamber and business community's highest priorities, including reauthorization for the next 7 years for the Export-Import Bank, Terrorism Risk Insurance Act, the flood insurance reauthorization, the repeal of a number of healthcare tax provisions, and the Secure Act. I'm proud to tell you that as she has every year that she has been in Congress, both the House and now in the U.S. Senate, Senator Blackburn earned the Chamber Spirit of Enterprise Award. So, Senator, regrettably we can't be in person to receive your award, but today just want to recognize you on behalf of the U.S. Chamber, the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce, and all of their participants on this call today for your leadership in Washington and for recognizing you as a Spirit of Enterprise Award recipient again this year. Thank you very much for your leadership and what you do for us in Washington.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It is always an honor to work with you and to make certain that we're out there fighting for free enterprise. And at some point, when COVID is over, we'll be able to again stand there and hold that award and snap that photo and properly express our gratitude for the great work that you all do. So thank you very much.
You're most welcome. I like to say that the award is actually in quarantine at headquarters right now.
I love that. Well, hopefully we can get it out of quarantine at some point soon.
Exactly. Thank you, Senator.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, now I'm going to introduce now Mark Braden, who is a Senior Vice President for Mercury Global Public Affairs. Mark has, for those of you that have listened to Mark, I know he's given a number of presentations. He gives a really unique insight into federal elections and some of the things that's going on. Mark is a former campaign manager to former senators. He runs the bipartisan firm State Public Affairs practice, working in Alaska, Alabama, Albany, and all points in between the United States. So, Mark, with that said, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We look forward to hearing what you got.
No, thank you, Bradley, and thanks for having me. And I appreciate you describing it as unique. That's one way to put it. But thank you for that introduction and the whole chamber team putting this together. So just a note to the chamber folks, my participants sharing screen has been disabled. So if you guys could help me out there, I'd appreciate it. But let's see.
I'm working on it for you, Mark. Give me just a second.
Thank you. Well, as we work on it, I'll just talk about the first slide I had prepared. We sit here 47 days until Election Day. And I think the most important item that I have to share with everybody is folks are voting. There are, here we go, Kentucky, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin all have absentee ballots have been mailed out. Minnesota, West Virginia tomorrow, and then this weekend you can start the absentee ballots here in Tennessee and a number of key states will be headed towards our mailboxes. So folks are voting. Election day keeps getting moving up and up, and of course we've all heard about the mail-in voting. Here's kind of the breakdown. 9 states in the District of Columbia have universal mail-in balloting, which is important. No matter if you request it or not, you get a ballot mailed to your address. 35 states have allowed for no excuse. Here in Tennessee, we have a thing called excuse. We have to excuse for a mail-in to request a mail-in ballot. 35 states have no excuse. You can request if you want to or not. It's important to note that of the states voting this week with regards to absentee ballots are in the mailbox or on the way, there are 6 either swing or considered close U.S. Senate races in these states, and the states that are voting now, 205 electoral votes are in those states. So it's a pretty big, it's a substantial chunk of folks that are starting to vote. As we kind of look towards the presidential race, the state of the race, the messages that you'll hear for the next 47 days out of the Biden camp is a pretty standard message for challengers. Are you better off under this president than you were 4 years ago? And the Trump rebuttal will be, of course, yeah, you are. If it weren't for a once in a generation COVID pandemic and a media that is trying to thwart the MAGA agenda from day one. Ronald Reagan had a campaign slogan, it's going to be morning in America. And I think if Biden's campaign were serving him right, he would more focus on boring in America. I think that Democrats and the Biden campaign saying if you vote Biden, we'll make the presidency boring again will be at least to some of us that live and breathe this, it may be a small sector of voters, but having a sense of normalcy, a 24-second news cycle that's slowed down to at least 48 seconds would be nice. The Trump campaign will also say Biden, if elected, won't be in charge. Vote Biden and AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Congresswoman from New York. Of course, she is kind of a broad, using her as an example of the broad progressive shift in the Democrat Party to the left. But in theory, her brand of politics will be in charge. And lastly, the Biden campaign is focusing on those with college degrees. Again, a very broad generalization, but think of the suburbs in polling across the country and in key states. You've seen college-educated, especially white voters, have moved away from Trump and towards either undecided or to Biden. And the Trump campaign will continue to focus on those without college degrees. I think it's really important to note that there is room for Trump to grow. In 2012, Mitt Romney got more votes in that presidential race in a loss than Donald Trump got in 2016 with a win. Now, some would say you have to go get those Romney voters, which are college educated, but Trump's folks are focused on the non-educated, non-college educated. In addition to Hispanics and African Americans, we'll talk about here in a little bit. There is if there is any kind of underreported undercurrent here in the presidential races, is especially as the Hispanic voter is soft on Biden right now, which will be interesting to see how it manifests in the next 47 days. So as we talk the messages, I want to talk about the states that matter. First and foremost are the Big Ten states. Big Ten states are very simple. It's Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Nothing against our friends in Jersey, Maryland, Indiana, and Illinois. You just don't matter for the context of this. The Big Ten states are important, as if Trump is able to hold all the states he won in 2016 and can win either Michigan, Pennsylvania, or Wisconsin, he hits this magic number of 270 electoral votes. I think it's no coincidence that Trump is spiking the proverbial football, and I wouldn't be surprised if he comes out and spikes a literal football tonight in Wisconsin about the Big Ten announcement playing football. And it was really interesting. I was curious because Big Ten football, as SEC football does as well, kind of reverberates around the country. There are big pockets of, for instance, Ohio State football fans. I found some data this week in North Carolina, Arizona, and Maine, and just keep those states in mind as we continue talking. I also looked at data and saw that there's also pockets of Tennessee football fans in Nome, Alaska, and a pocket of fans in Towner, North Dakota. So I don't know who is in Towner, North Dakota, or Nome, Alaska, but they're definitely all Vol, and we appreciate that. We take all we can get. Florida, of course, will be a state that matters. I think it's been trending a little bit towards Trump. Again, Hispanic voters, the soft Hispanic voters, and even some that are coming to the Trump camp. But the new swing states, in my opinion, Texas. Texas, for the first time, there won't be straight ticket balloting in the state of Texas. My friend Vince Harris, who you'll hear from a little bit, I'm sure he has some thoughts on Texas politics. But Texas is getting a lot of money spent there. I mean, the Biden campaign's going in this week or last week with a big buy. Texas is changing. And for the first time, they may actually be able to flip Texas. North Carolina, our neighbor to the east, there's also a swing Senate race there with Tom Tillis. It'd be very interesting to see if Trump can flip some evangelical African Americans in the northeast corner of the state, in addition to turning out the non-college educated voters, especially under 40 men. In western North Carolina and kind of across the central Piedmont, in between, Randolph County and other places through there. And then lastly is Arizona. Arizona, a lot of migration from California, shifting attitudes among white college educated voters, especially in the humongous suburb that makes up Maricopa County, Arizona. 60% of voters in Arizona live in Maricopa County. It's a suburb of Phoenix. And it's predominantly white and predominantly college educated there. And the last are two quirky states, how they apportion their electoral votes. First is Maine. In 2016, President Trump won one of the 4 electoral votes in Maine. Think of it very blue collar. Makes sense since it looks more like the second congressional district of Maine looks more like Michigan than it does look like Maine in terms of demographics. And then lastly, Omaha. Omaha was won in 2008 by Obama. It's more suburban, and just as Nashville is a blue dot in a red state, Omaha is a blue dot in a red state, and that congressional district is up for grabs. Don Bacon's the member of Congress there. He's in a very tough race this cycle. So you could have a scenario where, like in 2016, Trump won Maine 2 and picked up an electoral vote despite losing the state. Biden has a chance to pick up the electoral vote in Omaha. I wanted to also kind of run through some things. There's kind of want to look at how COVID might have affected the race. March 13th was that Friday the 13th where it felt like the world shut down. At that time, according to Real Clear Politics aggregate average, nationwide, Biden led by 6%. Today, he leads by 7%. So not much change, a little bit, but still well within the margin of error on a poll. In key states, Pennsylvania, Biden's lead increased by 0.5%. Trump dropped 0.5%. In Michigan, Trump went up 0.8%. In Wisconsin, he went down 6.8%. And in North Carolina, he went up 2.6%. So in these key states, it's a mixed bag, but I think you kind of see, especially in Pennsylvania and Michigan, especially as the unemployment rate comes back in those states, you kind of see a regression back to, not much has changed in those states. And I think what's really difficult is historically, I think we saw in 2016 and even 2018, polling in the Midwest, especially, and polling uneducated, non-college educated voters is very difficult. I'm reminded of Richard Cordray, the former Consumer Protection Finance Bureau director under Obama, ran for governor of Ohio. He led in every poll but one, and then lost on election day in Ohio. I think that's a stark reminder that polls aren't always the truth, but also don't discount. I think there's more to the story under the top lines that we'll get into in a second. Again, look at the economic effect. The blue line here is the Biden margin, and the red line is the unemployment rate nationwide. And you see kind of course, the blip up in red in March and April, and you kind of see getting into May and June, it now is kind of parallel track coming down. And so then kind of estimating out, you see here with the unemployment rate and the Biden margin, as the unemployment rate ticks back down to almost 4%, can Trump close the gap? I was reminded by one of the previous presentations I did for the chamber in 2016, when Trump came down the escalator at Trump Tower, the national ballot was Hillary Clinton +2. When he accepted the nomination in Cleveland, the national ballot was Hillary Clinton +2. And the day before the election, the national ballot was Hillary Clinton +2. The billions of dollars spent, a lot of tweets, a lot of Facebook posts, polls went up and down, but at the end of the day, it stayed the same. And I think, if not for COVID, I think we probably would see kind of that same 2 to 4% margin over time. But I think it's kind of gotten back to where it all started. And I think come election day, a national poll will be anywhere from 2 to 5, 2 to 4% for Biden. So another big key point things folks are talking about are the delayed results. There's a best case scenario. We all kind of go to bed at 2 a.m. on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, knowing who won. Worst case scenario, we are cutting the turkey on Thanksgiving and talking about how crazy this is. We don't have a president yet. And the probable case is we're somewhere probably Wednesday afternoon, knowing, given all the absentee ballots and other things that go on. We probably won't know until probably Wednesday afternoon exactly who won the presidency. And we may not know until December about the Senate, given unique runoff states like Georgia. The outcome may be delayed for the U.S. Senate. A couple scenarios I want to run through real quick are the Biden and Trump scenario. What I think is pretty likely if they win, and then my favorite is the chaos scenario. So here's the map from 2016. You see up in Maine, you see the split there. The red, one electoral vote, the other threw into to Clinton. 306, 232, Trump states in red, Biden states in blue. So scenario one is Biden just flips the field on Trump. He gets 306 to 232. He wins the Big Ten counties, Big Ten country, excuse me. The Arizona and North Carolina go to Biden. Maine's one electoral vote goes back to the Democrats, and he picks up the Omaha seat. And Dems in this scenario would more than likely control the Senate, 51, 53 seats, give or take. The second scenario is Trump holds Big Ten country. He holds on North Carolina and he holds on to Texas. I think Arizona and Maine and really every kind of scenario at this point is probably gone in 2020. But he holds his map except for those two. And in this scenario, the Senate remains in Republican hands, 51-53. And like I said, my favorite scenario and a political nerd's dream and maybe a nightmare as well is the chaos theory. So again, here's the 2016 map, 306 Republican, 232 Democrat. There's a likely scenario that's out there that we have a 269 tie. That means Trump holds most of his map. The Maine one goes back to Democrats. Wisconsin flips, North Carolina flips, Arizona flips. And in this scenario, the Senate is pretty tight, maybe 50-50. So in this scenario, what happens is we go to the House, and each state delegation, for example, Tennessee has a 7-2 split partisan Republican Democrat. each state delegation in Congress gets their one vote. Right now, it's 26-23 with Pennsylvania having equal number of Republicans and Democrats in their congressional delegation. So the House will vote in the chamber for president. At the same time, the Senate will vote for vice president. It has to be one of the two top vote getters in the race. So it has to be either Biden-Trump, Pence-Harris. If the House, it's very simple, if the House reaches a majority, that person's president. If the House cannot, the House does not come to a conclusion, i.e., they tie 25-25 and keep voting 25-25 until January 20th at noon Eastern time. The vice president becomes president until there's a until the House elects a president. So you can just imagine what Twitter would be like, what cable news would be like. It'd be Bush v. Gore on steroids in a 24-second news cycle. Again, a political nerd's dream and nightmare all wrapped in one. Very quickly, we wanted to kind of talk what Biden looks like if he does win. I think first and foremost, he takes the national security and foreign diplomacy mantle and runs with it. He starts focusing on Euro partnerships, rejoins the Paris Climate Accord, and really starts repairing partnerships around the world. He rolled back some of the tariffs that Trump implemented, especially on steel and aluminum. I think he's going to have pressure to do away with the filibuster in the Senate. Harry Reid did away with the judicial filibuster. I think the left wings of the party will want to take away the filibuster on policy. He'll also get pressure to focus on antitrust issues, especially regarding healthcare, especially regarding tech. He'll be under pressure by, again, the left wing of his party to nominate young progressives to the federal bench, focus on things like the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, and lastly, to plus up the top rate, the 39.6% and tax cap gains. But I think what we've seen with Biden is he's going to be almost no drama. Things you see through his campaign, not a lot of drama, not a lot of palace intrigue. And I think while he'll be pushed on some things from the left, I think he'll be really, he'll work well with folks like the Tennessee Chamber and the U.S. Chamber and your members. There'll be some things I'm sure that are not pro-business in the traditional sense, but I do think that there are some things that he could work on, especially infrastructure, workforce development, and things of that nature. Lastly, the U.S. Senate, 53 seats right now. Republicans have. We're defending 23, and if Democrats need 4 if Trump's reelected, and 3 if he loses. Kind of a key takeaway in 2016, the same party that won the presidential race in that state also won that Senate seat. So if you're Tom Tillis, if you're Cory Gardner, if you're Steve Daines, if you're Joni Ernst, others that are running for Senate, the key for you is outperform Trump. You're going to have to look at Trump's numbers as your floor. Republicans need to have 92 to 94% of Trump's voters vote for them. They can't have any spillover. In most states, Maine might be a different story. And they also have to think about middle-class males under the age of 40, especially those uneducated without a college education. Big 10 country is going to be important. Joni Ernst, especially Steve Daines to a certain extent. And then of course, women, especially in the suburbs. I'm thinking Wake County, Mecklenburg County, and other places. If Tom Tillis needs to go out and really talk about what he's done on the COVID, what he's done to pre-existing conditions, healthcare especially. Democrats are really running on a healthcare message again, as they did in 2018. Lastly, here in Tennessee, I know Ryan talked about it a little bit. I agree with Ryan's assessment. Ambassador Hagerty is expected to win handily. My question is, does he break 60% in the general? I think it becomes more of a congressional. For folks like me, it's going to be instructive to see if it breaks down on kind of a generic ballot, R versus D, or or where kind of there's some gains on the Democrat side, if there's suburban gains, if there's gains out Northwest Tennessee, Upper East, et cetera. I did want to point out that this might be the end of the Gary Davis phenomenon. I'm sure a lot of you are asking, who is Gary Davis? Gary Davis has run for U.S. Senate for 6 of the last six races in the Democratic primary. He has raised $0, but in 06 he got second. In 08 he got second to Bob Tuke. 2012 he got second. 2014 he got third. 2018 he got second, and unfortunately this time he got last. Gary Davis is a senior citizen in his upper 60s, I believe, lives outside of Chattanooga in Bradley County, but shares the name of a former county mayor, a former sheriff, and a couple business people down there, and continues to run with no money and continues to show pretty well. In 2008, he got 21% of the vote and got less than 20,000 votes in Bob Tuke, who was around 32% of the vote. So it was almost double digits behind. So I don't know if Mr. Davis is going to run again. I would love to. I'd love to go talk to the guy. Sounds pretty fascinating running, and doesn't campaign. He just puts his name on the ballot, and he's usually first, and that's why he first or second name on the ballot. That's why he gets second or third. I think we have a status quo in the House of Representatives on the 7-2 split again, and very important to note that there's a new day for Tennessee. I think I said this on one of the calls before. Going back to January of 2017, the Tennessee Congressional delegation had 4 gavels. We had Senator Corker, Foreign Relations, Senator Alexander, Health. Congressman Black was chairman of the Budget Committee, and Congressman Rowe was the chairman of Veterans Affairs. We had 110 years of service that member had in that seat over all of our 11 members of the federal delegation. Turn the calendar to January 2021, we're going to have 0 gavels. We're going to have 64 years of service in that seat. We're going to have 2 freshmen and 4 members that will be in their second term or second Congress. We're going to have probably Senator Hagerty, Congresswoman Harshbarger, and then we're going to have Senator Blackburn, who is not a freshman, but she is also someone who's been in D.C. for a while, but is one of those members that does not forget where she came from for sure. She will be in her second Congress in her seat, and then you'll have Burchett, Rose, and Green that are second year. So the point is that in just 4 years, we've gone from a very having a lot of chairmanships and having a lot of institutional knowledge in D.C. to really losing that. But I do think we have a great federal delegation that are picking up where folks like Senator Alexander, Senator Corker, and others, Congressman Duncan and others have left off. And the State House, State Senate, very quickly, don't see much happening there. I think status quo again. I hope you all wrote congratulations notes to Swan, Nicely, and Yeager as they face no primary or general election. They filed for the ballot, and no one else filed against them, and they won. The Gresham seat will be, that's really the, other than Steve Dickerson here in Nashville, and then again status quo of the House with a couple Shelby County suburban races, and Rep. Sparks is kind of the 3 ones to watch. So, and then finally, I think I said finally a couple times, 47 days. Here's a really quick calendar of what's going on. Again, point you to September 19th in 2 days. Michigan begins early voting, and absentee ballots will be mailed out here. And then October 14th, early voting starts here in Tennessee and North Carolina. And lastly, Nashville, Tennessee, as it should be, will be the center of the universe October 22nd, with the 3rd presidential debate held down the street here in Belmont. And it'll be really interesting, maybe 33%, 35% of voters would have voted by that time, maybe more. So, I think that's going to be really highly watched debate. And it's great to see Nashville's in the spotlight on that one. So with that, that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Mark. We appreciate all of that insight, and it will certainly be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of months with all these really important races. We are a little tight on our time frame, so unfortunately we won't have time to take any questions at the moment. But before we get to our next speaker, I want to again recognize our sponsor for today's event, Vanderbilt University. Thank you, Vanderbilt, for making this possible. And before our next speaker begins, I want to go ahead and introduce him, Vincent Harris. Vincent is the CEO of Harris Media, a digital marketing and communications firm that has worked for Fortune 500 companies and world leaders like Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and former Florida Governor Rick Scott. Harris attended Baylor University for his undergraduate degree, University of Texas for his master's degree, and is married to fellow Baylor Bear Chelsea and the mother of their little girl, Trinity Joanna. So Vincent, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Can y'all hear me? Is everything good?
We can.
Great. Well, thank you all for having me today. And I'm going to talk to you about digital media and this election cycle. So let me, oh, it's loading. Hang on. So let me start with the fact that COVID has been sad for most industries, but it hasn't been sad for digital, and it hasn't been sad for online advertising, and it hasn't been sad for social media. If we look at the number of people that are using social media and that are spending time online, all of those things have gone through the roof over the past 6 months. So from a campaign, from a business perspective, here's a couple charts. The chart on the left talks about the percentage of adults that are using social media more over that core COVID time between March and May. The chart on the right is talking about connected TV, and I don't know about you all, but my wife and I, we don't actually have cable. We use Hulu, Netflix, some kind of combination, depending on if the Mandalorian's out, we'll buy Disney Plus or get rid of Disney Plus. So connected TV, this cycle, it's actually the first cycle where significant money is being spent on these platforms like Hulu and Roku and YouTube TV, because they are actually now very important places for campaigns and for issue advocacy groups to be reaching voters. These charts here are from Facebook, and I think these are crazy numbers. So Facebook released some information during the first round of the coronavirus. You can see on the left-hand side that chart that's going sky high. That is showing the amount of time that people in Italy were spending group calling each other on Facebook. On the right-hand side, you can see a couple numbers that Facebook released too, that messaging on Facebook increased over 50% during the core COVID months. And in places hardest hit by the pandemic, Messenger and WhatsApp use doubled. I mean, WhatsApp, just a couple cycles ago, WhatsApp wasn't even mentioned as anything that campaigns would be engaging with, but certainly this cycle, as campaigns are looking for ways to reach voters outside of the norm, WhatsApp has become something that some campaigns are engaging with. And campaigns are doing Facebook Lives instead of on-the-ground rallies. They are hosting very successful online fundraisers. And here's an example where Joe Biden raised over $7 million with a virtual fundraiser. My gosh, that's a lot of money to raise from people sitting in front of their computers. And I can tell you anecdotally, we're working, for example, for a gentleman named Madison Cawthorn. He spoke at the Republican National Convention, and he's running in Western North Carolina, actually right next to Tennessee. And Madison Cawthorn is raising a lot of money online. And even though he's a unique kind of a candidate, I can tell you that Madison would not be raising as much money as he is online if not for all of the previous stats that I mentioned to you. If if not for more voters, for voters spending more time on Facebook. And actually in campaigns past, most of our money raised on these campaigns used to come from email. So from day one, when I would get hired on a campaign, our main goal would be to get as many emails as possible so that we can then turn around and fundraise off of those people. Well, that has really changed over the past 2 years, because now not only are we raising more money from Facebook than we are from email. And I'm talking about directly from Facebook. Madison actually running an ad on Facebook, asking people to donate to his campaign, then clicking on the ad and then donating to him. That's actually brought in over half of our online donations just from Facebook ads. And it's actually much larger than just half. But text messaging is also, just to go forward for 1 second, SMS and peer-to-peer. I don't know if y'all have gotten all these unsolicited text messages like I have, but this is the first cycle. I feel like Beto O'Rourke really sort of started this off, our former congressman from El Paso in Texas. But campaigns now, you can go into a database, you can purchase cell phone numbers, you can send opt-in text messages to these folks, people that actually haven't chosen to select to get text messages from you, and you can send them whatever that you want. It is the Wild West right now in terms of SMS. And this is something where I feel like the regulation has not caught up to how campaigns are using this. I mean, I get 10 text messages a day from multiple districts and from multiple campaigns, because people are realizing that this is a wonderful way to raise money. I just did a race against Charlie Crist in St. Petersburg, Florida, and we were able to send a text message, for example, to the whole state of Florida, because everybody knows Charlie Crist in the whole state of Florida. They don't, and a lot of people, a lot of Republicans who we sent a text message to, they don't like Congressman Crist. So we sent a text message out trying to solicit money across the state. That we weren't able to actually do that a couple cycles ago. So this is a big change that's going on. And besides that ability to actually send these unsolicited text messages, which the fancy term is peer-to-peer text messages, because actually legally somebody has to be sitting there and clicking themselves to send the text message. So what campaigns are doing is they either hire volunteers and they get lists, and somebody has to physically go and click send on each of these text messages, or you pay a company that has a click farm, who knows where, and somebody's sitting and they're clicking on these. Each message has to be physically clicked by a human if you're doing this peer-to-peer. So it costs about 11 cents to buy a phone number and to send to it and to be able to receive a response. So you can scale that up as far as you want. And I think that you're going to see now, because of some of the additional regulations by the big tech companies like Facebook that are not allowing campaigns to run new ads for the last couple few days of the campaign. Well, now, how does a campaign with a last-minute piece of information, how do they quickly get that out there without now being able to run it as an ad online? Well, this is going to be one major way this cycle where people are going to be sending texts feverishly to large-scale lists. Obviously, text messaging also has a almost 100% open rate. It's got a much more significant engagement rate than an email does. Think about an email. You might send to a 1,000-person email list at your business, and you might only get 10% of people open it. So that's 100 people. And of the 100 people, only 10% are going to click. Well, now you got 10 people did something out of a 1,000-person list. It doesn't work like that with text messages. Because if you send to 1,000 text messages, a 1,000 cell phone numbers, you are getting almost 100% open rate. And of that open rate, you are getting something like 20 to 30% minimum engagement and click with what you send. So now for your 1,000 people you're texting to, you're actually getting 200 or 300 people to actually do something. So I definitely think that this slide is what's really new, this a cycle. I have some examples on the right-hand side. We're working with Congressman Doug Collins in Georgia. These are a few of the texts that we've sent to our internal list. So these are people that have chosen to sign up for our text list. So just to step back, people are spending a lot of money online. This was interesting when I went to pull this because I feel like there's a perception that President Trump is beating Joe Biden on Facebook or that he's Mr. Facebook. Joe Biden spent twice as much money as Donald Trump over the course of the last week on Facebook. That's a lot more money when we're talking about 4 million versus 2 million more on Facebook targeted to those states that Mark just did a great job talking about. So Donald Trump's using Facebook, Donald Trump's spending money on Facebook, but Joe Biden is outspending him. And I got to tell you that my mom, who lives in West Palm Beach, Florida, I was at her house the other day, and we were watching Hulu, and I didn't see a single Donald Trump ad on Hulu, and she's a connected TV person. We saw a ton of ads for Joe Biden. So I would say that the Biden campaign is doing these things that I'm talking about. Certainly Donald Trump is sending texts and he's tweeting a lot, but Joe Biden is outspending him. This is a fact you can see. So a couple other things, and then I'll open it for questions if anybody has it. Big tech's rules and regulations are crazy, and they're new, and they're changing every day. I mean, I think all of us should be concerned from a business free market perspective at these big tech companies and their power over us and our brands and our businesses and campaigns in their ability to censor and to regulate. Anybody who feels triggered or is feeling oversensitive about something that's posted, they seem to be censoring and stopping that. So where will that stop? One of my largest clients that we work with is the oil and gas industry. And last year we were doing a lot of work with ExxonMobil. And one of the concerns that ExxonMobil had was if people in the green space feel that content from ExxonMobil is too sensitive, are they going to be censored? How far does this go, right? So I think all of us need to be really watching this, because even though, I mean, to me, it's like the old, well, they came for them first and I didn't say anything, then they came for them and then they came for me. Well, they're starting already. They're coming for some people and censoring some people. So all of us should be watching for who they are actually censoring and just making sure that collectively as the business community, I think this is something where we should definitely be watching out here. New rules and regulations. Now, before I can run an ad, I have to upload my driver's license to Facebook. So every time I run an ad now, I have been certified by Facebook because of the Cambridge Analytica scandal. You can't run an ad without uploading all your information. Facebook mails something to people's houses to make sure that they live where they say that they live. So all of this has changed a lot in the ability to actually advertise. So my summary on that is everybody needs to be building up their own platforms. Everybody needs to be using Facebook right now to gain emails, to gain cell phone numbers, to build up a Facebook-like account, and then to use other social platforms too, like Parler. I have been so surprised, and I'm a Republican, just disclosing that, but I'm surprised because I have been surprised at the amount of people that are actually using Parler is what I'm trying to say. I didn't believe it at first. I didn't believe in it. But I have to tell you that just an example on the right-hand side here, you can see Congressman Collins on our Facebook page. We have 100,000 people on our Facebook page. When we post something for Congressman Collins on the Facebook page, an average Facebook post might get 10,000 reach. We only have 28,000 people on our Parler account. We posted something a day ago, and 13,000 people saw it. So on Parler, we're actually reaching more people without paying money than Facebook, even though we have 100,000 people on our account. Those are some true numbers, and that's crazy. So whether your businesses can relate to Parler or not, I think it shows that there's an opportunity for other social platforms to step up here. I was going to talk about TikTok, which, my goodness, I spent way too much time on TikTok and had to delete that app because that is an endless thing there. You can scroll and scroll for freaking ever on TikTok, I gotta say. So we are not using TikTok for campaigns, for most campaigns, because everyone on there is 14 years old. But Parler is a good place for conservatives to be advertising and to be on. So really, that was my presentation. And does anyone have any questions? And thank you all again for inviting me to the Tennessee Chamber.
Thank you, Vincent. That was really informative and interesting. Yes, we're kind of short on time, so if you're all right, Vincent, if they can email you, that's okay.
Sure,
so
sure, that sounds great.
Yeah, your email up there, that's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. Up next, I'm going to introduce Moore Hallmark. You guys already seen him earlier in the program, but just a refresher, Moore Hallmark is Vice President of Regional Affairs and Advocacy for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Hallmark manages the Chamber's 7 regional offices that are responsible for legislative and political grassroots strategy in all 50 states. He also manages the Chamber's Southeastern region. Hallmark leads the Chamber's efforts to strengthen its regional operations and relationships with member businesses, associations, and chambers of commerce. Before joining the Chamber, Hallmark was Governmental Affairs Director for the Associated Builders and Contractors of Georgia, where he served as the association's chief lobbyist. Hallmark has a political science degree from the University of Mississippi and a public relations degree from the University of North Alabama. So with that, we're going to welcome back Moore Hallmark.
Thank you, Lauren. And thank you again, Bradley, and Ryan, for the opportunity to join you today. The benefit of following the senator and Mark, in this case, who both covered the election landscape and the phase 4 negotiations, it leaves little for me to say. So I thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions you have at this point. I'm just teasing, of course. As the senator did mention, they've been in negotiations for really months now, and without a lot of significant progress. Keep in mind, as we get closer to the elections, it makes it even more difficult. Senator Blackburn did mention that the fact that they were unable to pass a phase 4 bill prior to the August recess, President Trump did issue a series of executive orders. There were 4. One was a $400 unemployment benefit extension or order. It included $300 from the federal level, but required at least $100 or $100 match from the states. And I was talking to Ryan the other day, and apparently Tennessee is nearing depleting their funds to try to continue that program. There was an eviction order protection. However, it left the decision on how to proceed with that to the discretion of the Health and Human Services Secretary and the CDC. There was the student loan deferral extension, which deferred federal loans, not private loans, but federal loans through the rest of the year. And then there was a payroll tax cut. It was deferring the federal tax for individuals whose income is less than $100,000 for the remainder of the year. Prior to the August recess, the House did pass their version of a phase 4 bill. It was called the HEROES Act. It was about a $3.5 trillion bill that was dead on arrival in the Senate. Senator Mitch McConnell introduced last month, seems like 6 months ago, but last month, a bill called the HEALS Act. And it was a $1 trillion, about a $1.3 trillion package that was largely dead upon introduction and was never even brought up for a vote. Last week, as the senator mentioned, the Senate did try to pass what they called a skinny bill, paring down much of those provisions, taking out some of the others that were in other bills. That was going to cost around $600 billion. It did get 52 of the 53 House Senate Republicans who voted in support of it, which was actually a small victory for Senator or Majority Leader McConnell, because a large number of his caucus in the Senate have opposed any additional spending on any more on COVID-related or phased bills because of concern for the deficit and overspending in previous packages already. And then earlier this week, as you may have seen, the Problem Solver Caucus, which is made up of 25 Republicans and 25 Democrats, introduced what they call their March to Common Ground bill. And this is about a $1.5 trillion bill that calls for both new stimulus money and reallocation of previously appropriated CARES fund funding. The framework for this bill is based around $100 billion for testing and healthcare, $316 billion in direct assistance to individuals and families, and that would include a stimulus check, $120 billion in enhanced unemployment assistance. Their plan would call for about a $450 federal spending on unemployment benefits for 8 weeks, followed by an up to $600 a week, but not to exceed 100% of a person's previous wages. It would be a 13 weeks starting in mid-October and running through January 2021. Their bill also called for $290 billion in small business and nonprofit assistance. This is largely extending the Paycheck Protection Loan Program and EIDL loans, and including nonprofits. It'd be $145 billion for schools and childcare, $500 billion in new money for state and local government aid, $400 million in election support, $52 billion in broadband, agriculture, UPS, and census assistance. And there was also, they also included potentially an additional $400 billion of possible automatic boosters, and then the potential of roughly $200 billion in automatic reductions. Those boosters and reductions would be based upon COVID hospitalization metrics and vaccine progress, kind of monitored through the winter and early spring of next year before those boosters or reductions would go into effect. It also included a big priority for us at the Chamber, and that is liability protection and providing liability protection for schools and businesses from frivolous lawsuits. Now, this proposal actually has some merit and some legs right now in Congress. In fact, we were on a call with another member of Congress earlier today, and he advocated for those on the call to encourage their members of Congress to push the leadership in the House to bring up the Problem Solvers bill and debate that and negotiate that and use that as a real starting point for negotiations to try to get something done. Democrats have really started amping up their pressure on Speaker Pelosi to get things done. Largely, these Democrats are in those more moderate districts, those who flipped from Republican to Democratic seats 2 years ago. They're really needing something to be done. And you saw earlier this week, Speaker Pelosi announced that the House would remain in session until a deal is reached, which is a little bit ironic since a number of their members are back home anyway and doing things through proxy and voting and stuff as well. However, the fact is they're looking at staying in business, I guess, and not going home to campaign until a deal is reached. There hasn't been a whole lot of room for negotiations on both sides, but we will see what happens. We haven't at the Chamber endorsed any of these proposals, the HEROES Act, the HEALS Act, or this new Problem Solvers bill. There are provisions in all of them that we support and encouraging Congress to adopt, but we haven't supported any one of them. Now, there are priorities, though, that we have been encouraging, and speaking of those priorities, we've encouraged congressional leaders, the White House, and others, that there are 5 key components or priorities that we believe must be a part of any Phase 4 bill. Some of those are they're really all, for the most part, included in the 3 bills I mentioned. But those are liability protection, support for small and mid-sized employers, support for child care in K through 12 schools, unemployment and job training, and state and local assistance. With liability protection, we've been calling for months now, timely, temporary, and targeted liability relief that would provide employers and healthcare providers, nonprofits, educational institutions, and others a safe harbor from those type of lawsuits, that when they make good faith efforts to follow public health guidelines, that they're going to be protected and not face potential liability lawsuits. The HEROES Act, the House HEROES Act did not include in their bill any liability protections in it. However, the Senate's HEAL Act and the Problem Solvers bill did. Secondly, support for small business and mid-sized employers. The CARES Act did provide broad support for virtually all industries. We're just encouraging Congress now to provide more targeted relief for industries, particularly those and small businesses, particularly those that are in those industries where they are still partially shut down or shut down entirely because of social distancing requirements. We've called on Congress to extend and expand the deadline for paycheck protection loans through at least the end of the year, and include nonprofits as eligible, like chambers of commerce, to be eligible for those loans. We're hoping that Congress would make the paycheck protection loan forgiveness process easier for small businesses. In fact, Senator Blackburn mentioned this, and automatically forgiving loans of under $150,000. And there are other things that we've called on, such as allowing paycheck protection loan borrowers to access the employee retention tax credits only after they've exhausted all their PPP loan monies as well. The HEROES Act, the HEALS Act, and the Problem Solvers Act bills do address these concerns and these issues in different manners and in different amounts as well. Thirdly, child care and education. You know, many schools around the country are reopening. Some are doing phased-in reopening. Some are still doing virtual reopening. But in any case, child care centers and schools, both high school and colleges, must be opened safely and under the guidance of public health officials. And we're encouraging Congress and hope that Congress will provide some critical financial assistance to help aid in those reopenings. All 3 of those bills that I've mentioned already now do address this, again, in different ways and different amounts. Just 2 other provisions that we see as important in a phase 4 bill, and that is unemployment and job training. As I mentioned a moment ago, the $600 federal assistance that was in addition to the state benefits for those who lost their jobs or were underemployed in their jobs because of various reasons due to the COVID pandemic, is one of the biggest sticking points in the negotiations taking place as we go through this. We have suggested a middle ground, but whatever they do, and we do believe there's something that has to be done to continue to assist those Americans who are unemployed or simply underemployed at this point, that there does need to be some assistance. It does not need to be an amount like $600 again a week that prevents or deters people from actually going back to work, and certainly not to the extent that it exceeds the amount of money they were making prior to losing their job. All 3 of the bills that I've talked about, again, do address this issue in very different amounts. For example, the HEROES Act does continue to extend the $600 federal assistance all the way through the end of the year, and actually through January of next year, where the 2 other bills have different amounts, lower amounts to that. And then lastly, we do believe that there does need to be some assistance to state and local governments who have also been hit very hard by this pandemic, and revenues coming in to the governments in those cases. We've called on timely and temporary targeted support for those local and state governments as well. However, it's critical that whatever they do, it be fiscally responsible. All three bills do cover this as well in different amounts. Mark gave a great political update and kind of laid out the landscape of things to kind of watch for across the board, from state elections there in Tennessee, and of course the federal landscape as well. And I won't get into a lot of it. Some of the things that we're watching, and just kind of add on a little bit more to what Mark was talking about. We are less than 50 days out from the elections. Many states have already started their early voting and their absentee voting and in-person, or not in-person, but mail-in ballots. He is right. There's going to be probably 3/4 or more that will have already voted by the time November gets here. We at the U.S. Chamber do not engage in the political election or presidential elections. We do so at the House and Senate level. At the federal level, that is. We have endorsed Bill Hagerty in that Senate race and are optimistic about his election and working with him as Tennessee's next senator, but you never know. Our biggest priorities at the Chamber in this political cycle is to maintain a pro-growth majority in the Senate as a backstop to potentially some of the things that may come from the House, particularly if it stays in control of the current majority, and some of the bills that they've proposed in the past, like the Green New Deal and others. But as we watch the race for the White House, there's some things that we're watching and finding very interesting. For example, since January and through August, about 38% of the country feels that we're going in the right direction or on the right track, while about 54% say we're on the wrong track. These are always very important measurements as to the mindset of how people are seeing and the issues and so forth as they go to the ballot boxes. Trump's approval rating really throughout his first 4 years has never really gone over 50%, but hovers still around 47%. His disapproval is around 53%, which is a 6% difference. And in comparison to his predecessors at this same time when they were running for election, President Obama was at plus 5% with a 49 to 44 approval versus disapproval. President Bush had a plus 8%. His approval was 53%, 45% disapproval. And then Bill Clinton was at plus 28% in his reelection effort at 60% approval, 32% disapprove. The top concerns for voters in this election have shifted a little bit since earlier this year, where the economy, healthcare, and some of those things were kind of top of the line for everybody. Those things are still, the economy and healthcare continue to be on there, but now coronavirus and violent crime and justice reform are among those priorities now on people's minds. Speaking of the economy, the Real Clear Politics poll taken over the last few weeks shows that Trump has a slight edge in his handling of the economy, according to the polls, with 50.4% approval versus a 46.4% disapproval. So he's kind of in the +4 range right there. As for the president's handling of the coronavirus, however, that's not so good. In March, he had a 48 approval versus 47 disapproval for a +1%. Today, his approval is at 43% versus 53% disapproval on his handling of the coronavirus, so for a negative 13%. However, that is up from the last 2 months. In July, it was a negative 20% and a negative 17% in August. So his approval versus disapproval on his handling has improved slightly over the last 2 months. When you look at the motivation for voters and their enthusiasm for voting for their candidate versus their fear for voting of the other candidate, when polling all voters, 51% are enthusiastically voting for their candidate, while 43% are voting for out of fear. Trump voters are more enthusiastic, with about 59% enthusiastic about voting for the president, while Biden voters are more voting out of fear for Trump winning re-election at about 54%. Voters are also divided on what they want. 44% of voters overall want someone that will confront and challenge the establishment and change the way things are working in Washington, kind of shake things up. We saw that 4 years ago, very much so, with the election of President Trump. Today, 69% of Trump voters want this type of action when they vote, versus 22% of Biden voters. Now, 46% of voters wants someone who's going to be bringing more competence and compassion to the way government operates. 7% of Biden's voters want that versus 23% of Trump's voters. And there are about 7 states that we're keeping a close eye on. Mark mentioned a number of these as well, kind of that Big Ten country up there. He mentioned kind of how the polls are shaping up, and 4 of those states, 4 of the 7, being North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. But a couple other states that we're keeping a close eye on, Arizona, Florida, and Minnesota. All 7 of these states, and the polling numbers as of today are within the margin of error. So they're all very close, and a lot could break in the next 47 days or so. And lastly, the balance of power, and this will be the last thing I'll mention. In the Senate, as you know, the Republicans hold a 53-47 advantage. There are about 11 races that are in the lean Republican or lean Democrat or toss-up categories right now, or in the columns. The Senate race there in Tennessee, I believe, is solidly in the Republican column. No worries there. Doesn't even show up on anybody's map in this case. And then in the House, Democrats hold a 232-198 advantage, a 34-seat majority, and Republicans would need to gain about 20 seats to gain the majority there, which is a tall order to say the least. But you never know. So with that, that's probably more than you wanted, but I'll stop there. And if there's time, Lauren or Bradley or anyone else, I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have, or any of the other panels that are still on, and try to answer for any of us to try to answer any questions if time allows. But thank you again for the opportunity to join today.
Thanks so much, Moore, and thanks for that presentation. Thanks to the U.S. Chamber for your great partnership and all the good information that y'all always put out there for us. We appreciate that very much. We are about out of time. If anybody, any participants have any questions, we can wait just a couple seconds and see if they come in. But while we're waiting, I just want to say one more time, thank you to Vanderbilt University, our great sponsor for today's event, for making this possible. And I am not seeing questions coming in, and since we are out of time, I will go ahead and say thanks to everybody for joining us today, and we hope that you'll join us on our other upcoming programming. Thanks so much, everybody.